I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast. This is a podcast where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth and the last told. Just heads up, I have upgraded to Pro, so the interviews now can run as long as they want to. So I don't have any more time restrictions on the interviews. So hopefully for my listeners, you get to have a little bit more in-depth interviews from now on going forward. I also have like 5,000 buttons that I'm dealing with. And I'm also having to deal with the neighbors upstairs stomping on the floor. So you'll have to hear the hippos for this episode. But today I'm joined by a special guest. I'm joined by Ivan Pavlovic. He is a self-educated author of Making Money on the Money Printer. Having lived in various European countries, Ivan has discovered that systemic forces affect everyone, especially the poor and the middle class, even in wealthy nations. His book delves into the fundamentals of economics and the monetary system, exploring how cyclic booms, busts, and market distortions shape our financial landscape. He's going to share with us his insights on how inflationary government policies twist the environment and offers practical advice for beginner investors looking to thrive amongst these challenges. So, Ivan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Noah, and thank you for inviting me.
So if you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I've been working in financial sector since the start of my career for almost 10 years now, more on the regulatory and operational side of things in the investment funds area. So I don't have a formal financial or economic background. I studied law, but having lived in European financial centers and also in general in different countries, I just got very curious about these things, about economics, about finance. Of course, for my personal reasons, just in terms of everyday life, just like I think many other people, probably lots of your listeners are, they want to understand what's going on in the world. And so that's what made me go that road. And it was just it has been a good road so far. So that's why I decided to write a book in the end to kind of summarize my thoughts about everything.
Well, I'm really excited to be able to ask some of the questions you have provided because I don't know how it is in Europe, but America, everything has gone up. Like groceries have gone up, gas has gone up, even though it was supposed to come down. I'm still waiting for it to come down to my $2. So, do you have an explanation of why everything's getting more expensive?
Yes, and that explanation is actually very simple, although the powers that be try to confuse us all. And now, of course, this probably sounds very pretentious when I put it like this to your viewers. Like, who is this guy now? Why is he saying that? Oh, this is all very simple. You know, what are these? Some conspiracy theories, etc. No, the point is right that governments are putting out their statistics about inflation, and basically they are, through these statistics, they are rating themselves, right? Because if inflation is high, that means that they are not the ones doing good job leading us with their policies. So they need to then uh, invent different reasons why actually those policies are good for us, for our safety, for our lives, etc. And of course, they need to play with those statistics along the way so that the numbers are not exactly showing the real picture. But just because I think what makes sense first is to really clarify what inflation is. And so inflation, when we speak about inflation, first thing that comes to people's minds is that, oh, prices have risen, right? That's inflation. Like, let's say plus, if inflation is 3.1, that means that prices overall in the economy in aggregate have risen by 3.1%, right? That's what people generally mean. And this is what we are all being taught about inflation, but that's not really correct. So first thing we need to understand is that if people produce and they save and they innovate, uh, this leads to better production processes, more efficient production processes. And so what this does is that ultimately it makes goods more available. So we have more goods available at in fact a cheaper price, because what happens is that the production process becomes easier as it is more efficient. So it takes less time and less resources and less labor to produce something. And this is why the producer can then lower the price. And if that producer doesn't do that, then his competition will do it to attract more customers. And so this is what happens naturally in capitalism, in free market capitalism, where prices are then supposed to naturally come down and not go up. Okay. And then when we have price increases overall in the economy, this can happen only through one single reason, and that is through the increased money supply. Because it is only the increased money supply, which is actually the act of inflation, that leads to rising prices as a consequence of that inflation. And again, I want to make it really clear: inflation is the increase of money supplies through the debasement, basically, of money, through the debasement of currency, right? And it's as old as the ancient age, ancient Rome, ancient Greece. They knew this already. They would take the monopoly over coinage of money, and then they would debase those coins with cheaper metals, right? And then later, when paper was invented, they would print well, create more paper notes than there was metals in the storage. And so this is very old process. Today, this process is, of course, much more sophisticated behind the scenes, because we are just playing with digits on the computer and lots of different financial instruments. But at the end of the day, it is all about the increase in money supply, really, when we speak about inflation. And so it is true that you can have prices rising as a consequence of certain events in the world. Like it can be a shortage of some good, like for example oil, or a war that results in a shortage of a good, such as oil, for example. But if you would have that, then the price of oil would go up, for example. But then if you would have a stable money supply, you could not spend equally on something else as well. You would basically have to, if you would still want to purchase oil at the higher price, you would have to give up some other good. And so therefore the demand for other goods would go down if you would be paying higher price for another good, that the price that has had risen. So basically, but if you continue to buy oil with the increased price and all the other goods that you used to buy previously, that can only happen if you now have more money for everything, to buy everything. And so this can only happen if the government or the banking system add more money to the economy.
That was probably one of the best explanations I've had. It. I'm like, can you fly over here and teach us that? Like, can you sign up for our financial classes here? Because that was very much well explained. So how
I'm
is
happy to explain it as many times as needed. I think everybody just needs to know it. It's very important.
so how is the money created?
Again, very good question. So and I will not go into details here of the entire process because, of course, it can differ through jurisdictions and other means. But what listeners just need to understand is first that we need to recognize that money is something that can be that can take different forms, and through history it had taken different forms. So people used seashells or salt and many other goods as money, basically as the most tradable commodity for exchange with other things. um, but then eventually what became the best form of money was gold and silver, and to a certain extent copper for very small units of transaction. Okay, because people trade goods with each other, and those goods trade in with price to one another, with for basically with the demand and supply of those goods between each other, right? So if there is very limited amount of gold, but gold is valuable and people want gold, but there is higher supply of silver than gold, therefore that higher supply of silver will make silver less valuable compared to gold, and so that's why one unit of gold will be of higher value than one unit of silver, for example, right? And so this is where we first how we get the feeling, okay, how much do I need to pay for something, right? Because I know how much of something there is, and then how much is it valuable to me, and then of course all these different minor demands from different people, they create the market value of a good on a certain day, right? Today we of course have very sophisticated markets that can show immediately in every second, every minute, the price of something, because the markets are so it's such a good they're so well connected, right? But what governments did is that they took the money that people had, and they basically took the monopoly of it through coinage first, right? And so they would say, okay, we are creating coins, they will look like this, the way we want them to look like, and then we will be you will have to use those coins if you want to transact within our territory, right? So they basically created currencies, right? And these currencies are called fiat currencies, because fiat means something that is decreed to by authority to have value, right? And so this is why if the government so this is why the government gave those currencies names, right? So for example, the ancient Romans had aureus or denarius. Today we have dollars or euros or yens, etc. So those currencies have name, but what they are actually what they initially meant were certain weight in metals. So for example, at the beginning of 20th century in US, 1 ounce of gold was 20 US dollars. Or in other words, it meant that $1 is in fact 1/20th of an ounce of gold. So $1 was in effect a paper note, a claim on the weight of 1/20th of an ounce of gold. Okay. And so basically through the government masked, through giving names to those currencies, it actually masked what we possess, right? And then eventually governments removed the right to exchange those currencies for metals. So you could not anymore come and claim your gold for US dollar. You could only use the US dollar paper or later on digits without actually exchanging gold for it. And so people just got used to using euros or dollars or whatever as money and calling it money, but it's not really money. And there are people who will say, well, those currencies can also be considered as commodities because they are mediums of exchange, widely accepted, etc. They do, to certain extent, better currencies especially serve as a store of value. So people can have different views on that. There is no one unified view of it. I personally prefer to think of it as money against currencies, just because it puts things easily for me in the right place. And even sophisticated economists like Austrian economists, they had different names for currency that is covered by metals versus currency that is created over that and that does not actually cover exchange of metals. So these are all the names where people can get confused. But I think that the most important thing is just to first understand that money is really something that people invented, and that it is just a commodity initially. And then we have currencies on the other side. And in today's system, so those currencies, or you asked me how money was created. So that money that we use today, or those currencies, they all are created initially from the central bank. So the central bank as an institution is the only institution that creates money, that can create money. So that's the source. And then basically there are, let's say, two exits or maybe better said, two entrances where that currency can enter economy, so that money can be then spent and that it can circulate in the economy. And so first source is the government. So if the government spends money, that it borrows, that creates additional demand. Now we just have to understand here. So before there is any money in the economy, the government cannot tax anyone because there is nothing to tax, right? If we are speaking about the currencies such as US dollar in today that is not covered by metals. So if we would now speak just about how it comes into being, this currency, basically what would have to happen is that the central bank creates money and the government borrows that money. How does the government borrow it? So it issues a bond. That bond is purchased by the banking system. And the question is, how did the banking system, because there is still no money in the economy, how did the banking system get the money to buy this government bond? And so the banking system got its money from the central bank. So what happened is that the central bank put bank reserves, so-called bank reserves, to the bank's accounts, and then the banks used those reserves to buy the government bonds, or in other words, to lend money to the government, right? And now the government has some money created out of nothing to lend, to spend on its programs and benefits and salaries of its employees, etc. Right? So this is one way that the money is created, through government spending, but only if the government has borrowed basically the money from the banking system that was initially created by the central bank. Okay. If once there is enough money in the economy, the government can of course be issuing bonds and sell them in a free market, where the ordinary citizens would be buying those bonds. And so people like you and me, if we would buy bonds, then what happens really is that this money that is already in circulation is going back to government, and then government again puts it back into economy if it spends it back. So but no new money is created in that sense. So the new money was created only if the government sold bonds to the banks, and the banks bought it with basically reserves created by central bank. Okay, that's one way. The second way that the money enters economy is if there are loans created by the banking system. So we saw technically in the first case, the bank lent money to the government, but actually then there is this, of course, second way where banks lend money to subjects in the economy. So you or me can come and ask for money to buy a new car or a house or for a ski trip, right? Businessmen can come and ask the bank to lend them money so that they can spend it on some business, right? And so what we just need to understand here is that initially there is actually in this fiat currency system, there is actually no savings on the bank's account. What savings are here are those bank reserves, basically the currency that the central bank gives to the commercial banks, and then commercial banks create real money, those real currencies, US dollars, Canadian dollars, euros, etc. They basically create them, or as we say, print them out of nothing, right? They don't need to necessarily print them in the sense of paper printing. They just create digits on someone's bank account, and voila, you can spend that money now. And so if the banks are scared to lend because of bad economic situation, then you have money contraction. And so what happens then is that suddenly there is not enough money floating around and anymore, and then you have basically contraction of entire economy, because people had false signals to spend initially when they borrowed. So I will not go now into this, but this is something that is called the Austrian theory of the business cycle. So basically, that bank lending is also influencing as it is influencing money supply, it is also influencing interest rates. And so interest rates being the signal to entrepreneurs, if there are how much savings there are in the economy, they basically base their projects on the levels of interest rate. And so if when the banks are creating more money through lending, it appears as if there is more savings in the economy, and so entrepreneurs start more projects. But if banks then get scared and they lend less, then you basically have contraction of money supply, because of course all those previous loans need to be repaid with interest constantly. And so that means that there always has to be more and more and more loans created, so that the previous loans can be repaid with that newly created money with interest. So that's those are the two ways. So either through government spending, when it borrows basically from the banking system with the money that was created by central banks, or through just commercial banks when they create loans.
So you mentioned earlier that people used to trade like seashells in for money.
Yes, people used all kinds of things, and I think a very simple modern example that we can give. So, for example, what I mentioned was also salt, right? So, salt was used as money on many. I'm from Croatia, so it was also used on some Croatian islands as money. But also, for example, an easy example would be cigarettes. That's a common example. Cigarettes in a prison, right? Because prisoners, they can't really transact between each other with dollars or euros, etc. normally. And so, but they're allowed to smoke, and then lots of them have cigarettes. And so even those who do not smoke, they might just get cigarettes so that they can exchange those cigarettes with other prisoners who do smoke for something else that they want. And so in that sense, a cigarette becomes money effectively in prison, because you want it so that you can exchange it for something else that you need, and you store it so that you can spend it on something else that you need. And that's what money really is. So gold, silver, all of these things, they're commodities that we need. So jewelers need gold. It is used in dentistry, in IT, etc. Silver is used in lots of things like electric cars, for example, as well, solar panels, etc. As antibacterial thing in pipes. So all kinds of use cases. But even if you don't plan to use it for any of these things, you might just buy an ounce of gold because you know that somebody else will want that ounce of gold. So that jeweler or that Elon Musk will want it for his Teslas, silver. So you will buy it because you will be able to exchange it for something else. And that's the same, with cigarettes in prison, or any other kind of money, form of money.
The reason why I was asking that was like, I didn't know if seashells, if they accepted seashells now, because I have like a whole like little bowl of seashells sitting over here, and I was like, I'm about to run to the best. Like,
Uh,
I'm like, you're telling me this whole time I've had money just laying on my table.
you. It sounds like you do a lot of snorkeling, right?
Well, I've never been to the beach. My mom went to the beach with a friend last year and she gave me some shells for me because it was
Okay.
more used as fidget toys, which I've not picked them up since, but I did not know that people used to turn those in for money. So I'm like, I've had money sitting over there this whole time. I'm like, the more you
Look,
know.
they're probably, probably in some countries you might still use them as money. You never know. So you might want to have one with you just in case on your
Listeners, if
trips.
you have seashells, steal all the seashells for money. Still all of it, but you didn't hear that from me. Why is it important to understand inflation and the monetary system, and how is it related to markets and crises?
So obviously, inflation, when we speak about inflation, again, I want to be very clear. We're speaking about the increase of money supply, and in general also manipulation of money supply, because there can be the increase of the money supply by the central planners, but there can also be decrease of money supply. They can contract the money supply. And so when they play around with money supply, uh, they are trying to do it based on some mathematical models, etc. They basically believe that a group of bureaucrats can influence entire economy, the way they want to. So, and that's the key part, right? So yes, sure, they can influence the economy, but uh, not not exactly the way they want it to be influenced, because there are always some unintended consequences to the policies that the government enacts. So there are first order effects which they will usually look at, but then there are second, third, fourth, and so on, or order effects that are caused by the policies. And this is the same with playing around with money, because what they do is, uh, they when they increase the money supply, um, that creates all kinds of distortions. So of course prices of things will go up, or they will not go down as much as they otherwise would, due to technological advances and innovations. um, then of course, as they create new currency, that will make certain parts of economy richer, because they benefit from it first, because they receive it first before all the other economic subjects. And so now they are able to spend that money at the, let's say, old prices. And so as that newly created money trickles down and creates additional demand on goods from one subject to the other, as it is exchanged, basically all these people, then they create additional money, they create additional demand for goods. And so they in effect then with all this demand that is created, that demand creates then, let's say, shortage of goods, of course. And basically what happens is that the prices of goods have to go up, right? So those that received money first, they benefited the most. But really what happens, what is very important for the entire economy, is that uh, that increase in money supply basically lowers artificially level of interest rates, temporarily at least, as this new money is created. Because if people would be mining gold, right, not everyone, but like gold miners, and then people would accumulate gold as money to spend it. People would then save that gold and they would put it in their banks to have it on their accounts, on their deposits. And so what would happen if people save a lot? So that would mean, okay, if there is more gold on those deposits, that means that people are saving more, right? They are not spending as much around. And of course, those deposits would be specially dedicated savings accounts, savings deposits, not those accounts that where you can just take the money whenever you want. So you would have to, it would be term deposits where you would be depositing your gold, let's say for 6 months or for 2 years. And so the banker would then know, okay, I cannot, I have to have that gold back for this person within 6 months or within 2 years. So if I'm lending it out, then I have to have it back so that they can take it up back, right? So the point is that if there would be more gold stored or any other thing, right, that is saved, then as there is more gold on deposits, that would create lesser demand from the bankers also for that gold, right? But it also means that if more money is being saved, that basically people have less need for it, right? Because that if they are saving, that means that there is lesser demand for it, right? And so what does the lesser demand for money do to the price of money, which is interest rates? Like for any other product, lesser demand lowers its price. And so if people save more, interest rates are supposed to go down. And that is the signal to the entrepreneurs. So those who want to start some new projects, oh, interest rates are getting lower. I can borrow money more cheaply, so that my project will be more will be profitable. So they calculate what will be the price of borrowing and what will be the price of project. And because that project then takes time, of course, because they are investing into capital goods, they will start those projects, right? But if on the other hand, in this fiat system, the currency is created artificially, so if it's just printed, so basically that means that there is no real goods like gold being stored or saved. So the money supply increases, and then people, as they put it on their bank accounts, it looks like now there is more savings on those accounts. And so, that newly created money is also usually used by the governments to buy their bonds, etc., right? So they create the demand for bonds, and that demand for bonds lowers those interest rates of the bonds. So basically what happens when you have this increased money supply is that the interest rates also go down, but artificially. So because there is artificial demand for those debt instruments such as bonds, there is artificially, it looks like there is more money on the savings accounts as that people are saving more, right? But what really happens is when those entrepreneurs then they borrow money and they start building new projects, houses, etc., all these people they compete for the same amount of goods and services that is still there out there in the economy, and but just with newly created money, right? And so what then happens is that as they all start those projects, they will realize that their initial calculation was wrong, and now they basically don't have actually that enough money for the project, that the project will be more expensive because all those other entrepreneurs are competing for the same amount of real goods that are in economy, right? So somebody will not get that good, or they will get less than they thought with the same price, right? The price of those goods will have to go up in that, as it's denominated in the fiat currency. That's the point really here. And so there are all kinds of distortions through this business cycle in the financial markets, because the price of financial instruments is distorted because of all this created liquidity in the form of just more currency. That new currency is then chasing also financial assets and other assets. This is why you can have high valuations in stock market, because again, people, they receive this cheap money and now they know that tomorrow it will be worth less in terms of real goods that it can buy. And so then people just throw it into something. So they either buy a house, or they buy some stock, or general stock market through investment funds. And so basically they chase real assets or real goods with that new currency, and that is all creating a lot of distortions basically in the process.
Earlier, when I introduced you, I said that you were an author of Making Money on the Money Printer. What made you write the book?
So thank you for asking me that. I just never thought about writing about such topic. Again, I'm not an economist. I don't have a formal financial education. Everything I learned was, through some things, of course, through financial sector where I worked, just because of curiosity. But most of economics that I've learned was just a personal path, because I wanted to understand why the cost of living is rising, why the standard of living was falling. And so, because it took me a few years to do that, and a lot of hours and weekends, etc., I was just thinking to myself that it would be great if there was maybe a concise guide for beginners, for many people who don't have time to spend, or who don't want to read thousands of pages, etc., so that they can relatively easily, through simple concepts, understand different topics. Because my book is about inflation, but it really speaks about different subjects that are related to inflation. Basically, about, again, how prices would normally fall, what is money and its brief history, how inflation impacts people, what is really our money system today, and so how the money is created, and then about the debt cycles, the recent crisis that we had in the last 20 to 30 years, and how everything is justified as well, because they're basically the system that we have today. This is not some knowledge that is just there and we don't know better. There are different schools of thought out there. There are different economists, and basically there is different knowledge out there, which is just not accepted as mainstream because it doesn't serve the interests of those who have the cards, who rule over us. And so, um, I also explained that part, right? How basically all of this, what is happening, is justified. And then finally, the final chapter is more about really investing itself. I think many people would be grateful to understand a few different topics about investing. If somebody could show them more or less easily path into everything, into financial instruments, asset classes, mindsets, emotions, all of these things. And another thing, apart from the sheer scope of literature that is out there, my my experience has been that a lot of interest literature, not everything obviously, but really a lot of interest literature is a bit dry. And so I wanted to make it really like as straightforward as possible, but also a bit like written in a, let's say, engaging way for the reader. So ultimately I just went for that challenge, and I said to myself, okay, maybe I should write a book, maybe I should give it a go and see how it turns out. um, and honestly, I didn't exactly know how it's going to look like when I was starting, but after almost 2 years of writing, I managed to finish it. So
I know you said that you had no knowledge about it or anything, and didn't want to go into it, but I think the book's really necessary for our climate, or wow, climate, our society right now. As I said, I don't know what other parts of the country is, but for people that live here in the States, it's money's been really, really tough nowadays. Job hunting's been kind of a pain. Everything's just skyrocketed. I mean, everything from gas, groceries, to rent and housing, as well as even and like food places and shopping stores have gone extremely high, and I don't think a lot of people quite understand how why it has gone up so much. So I think the book, for you to have no knowledge beforehand, to be able to write a whole book about what it is and explain it. I mean, even all the stuff you've explained to me, it's probably the most detailed explanation I've had ever given to me, and I'm just like, the school systems failed us. Our school systems failed us in that department. But what can a person do to protect themselves from, I guess, have money kind of stolen from them? What's some advice you have for that?
Look, I think the most important thing, and this will sound like a cliche, is to educate themselves. Because the thing is, and trust me on this, because I've been very careful listener. Uh, nobody knows everything, and you need to, if you're I'm speaking not just to you, right, to your listeners. If you are working so much every day and you're creating stuff out there, and you want to make your life, your family's life, your friends' lives better, and now you have those savings and you want to put them somewhere. If you just blindly trust someone to do it, I think that's very risky. And you want to learn and educate yourself. You don't have to become a super expert, and nobody has time to you need to spend years and decades learning about investing, economics, and everything. But I would say that before people start investing, they should first educate themselves at least on some basics, to learn just uh, again about some different topics. And then when they speak with financial advisors, with professionals, to ask those people about their opinion and their views, and to ask them to explain, why do you think that this will happen? People should first educate themselves, spend a couple of months, listen to podcasts such as yours, that's trying to introduce things to them, and then read a few books. You don't have to read the thousands of them, read a few. Uh, and then once you have some basic knowledge, then speak to financial advisors, professionals, before you do any investing, and challenge these people. Don't just take it for granted what they tell you, right? And so I think first of all, people should educate themselves. Second, if they understand business cycles, debt cycles, the money system we have, um, the basically how the interconnectedness of all of these things, the importance really of interest rates and bond market for other markets such as stock market and real estate market. So if people learn to understand just these basic concepts, they will be much more empowered really to take action, or more cautious before they take some reckless action, I think. And so once they've learned these things, they will understand also that there is no one single investment or speculation that is out there that will make them rich or protect their wealth. There are lots of different types of risks out there. Markets can go, both ways, always, with every asset class. Even being inside of financial system, can be risky on its own for different reasons. And so again, education first. Second, I think, just to leave maybe something a bit more tangible, again, buying, in my view, and this is again not financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor, I don't know anyone's personal situation, but I can just say my thoughts on certain things. So my personal view is that there will be, because of geopolitics, because of monetary system we have, because of debt levels, I do think that we will see more inflation, especially in the coming years, and that people will want to own hard assets, meaning things that cannot be printed or easily multiplied. And people should just be careful what they buy then. So there are assets that are already, to a certain extent overvalued. So just be careful what price you are paying for something. Make sure that you know what you're buying, why you are buying it, that it has value, and that it can protect you. But also make sure to be aware that everything can go down in price as well if there is a turn of events, and there is some sort of collapse that cannot be stopped easily, or where many people will get hurt, or at least temporarily. And so people should take into consideration different things, their investment horizon and risk tolerance and all these things. So I urge people to, before investing, just take some time and think and educate yourself. I think that's the best advice that especially beginners should have, but I think everyone should have in mind.
For people that want to follow you and if people are interested in the book and want to read it and learn some more about money saving, where can they find you? And most importantly, where can they find the book?
So I'm available on LinkedIn, Ivan Pavlovic. I live in Portugal, so they can probably find me easily. And I'm also available, although I'm not there too often, on Twitter, on X, IVNNPVL. And the book is Making Money on the Money Printer. It's only available on Amazon. And so in all honesty, for it's I think for beginners, it's specifically written for beginners, and it's if anyone wants to give it a shot, I would highly encourage them to do so.
Well, I appreciate you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing some of your knowledge with me. As you know, I feel like a few years ago it wouldn't be as important to talk about, but now it's so important to talk about now because everything's gone up, and I can't
You
vouch
know,
for everywhere else.
that's the thing. I started learning about these things, I think it was between 2019 2020. I was in still in my 20s back then, and that's the thing. People don't even become aware of these things because they happen slowly at first, right? But then as the central planners are losing control over these things, slowly but surely, then people are not dumb. They become more aware, and then once they become more annoyed or angry with things, that's where they are willing to put also more effort into actually going out there and educating themselves, and unfortunately having to spend more time on these things just to protect themselves. But it's good that we all learn something in the process. And look, if same for me, if I hadn't become curious and unsatisfied, I would never have also improved my knowledge. So I think that's just the path we all need to take, but also for the better future of humanity. I guess if more of us are educated, then we will be able to say no to some policies and vote against them, or at least act to protect ourselves, because we will be able to um, at least foresee with greater certainty the trend where things will go in the future.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with me. I think what you're doing is awesome, fantastic. And um, as I always say and do, I'll put all of his links in the description box below so that for people that want to further check him out, all of his links will be in one spot so you don't have to go searching the whole internet for it. It's easy access for you all in the episode. Again, thank you so much for joining me today and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Noah. It was a pleasure.
And as always, you can also follow me on social media as well. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. It's Lethal Venom Podcast on there, as well as following me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. It's Noah's Podcast on there. And you can also follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. I'm available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's basically everywhere. Feel free to follow in to stay up to date about when new episodes will come out. Again, thank y'all so much for listening to today's episode. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day and week. Y'all be safe, and I will catch you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.